Yeah, we don't. He could have a little bit of sidewall damage there to the car that could be affecting his aerodynamics just a little bit. But here comes Doug thinking about a move to the outside, going down into the chicane. He's going to have to be very brave to do it, and pulls it off. Oh, you can't get a whole lot closer than that. My goodness gracious.
Let's take a look at this from the hood, because this is where Partridge needs to change his pants, and Kinchler probably does too after he saw what happened in his mirrors. But Partridge comes in too hot, clips that inside curve, gets unsettled, then he's on the brakes. We're going to go in slow-mo here to see how close it was, and it was very close.
Yeah, the top three have been an incredible fight. Oh man.
Gently does it, boys, as they make their way down. They bang wheels. Oh, Sebastian Tixier, he goes tumbling over. Trengarade going off the circuit. Goodness gracious. Looked like Jim Shedlick went off the track in sympathy there.
This is the view that he has going through. He sees a couple lights in the distance, trying to get it rejoined.
Oh, that's not good. Careful, boys, careful. Too wide coming up, Eau Rouge. And the loser there is going to be Vaughn, as Karthik Pai keeps his foot in it. Vaughn going to lose another position there to Mika Lino, and Lino going to go for a 2-for-1 as they come down the Kemmel Straight. He has got such massive overspeed. Look at that move from the number 5 machine.
This is your chance to get behind the wheel. The opportunity to race just like the pros. From the grassroots levels, where we all got our start, to the most popular race cars on the planet. From the fairgrounds of Nashville to the high banks of Daytona, to tracks that will never be forgotten. Realistic driving, intense competition, all from the comfort of your own home. This is the ultimate motorsports simulation. This is iRacing.
Since 1960, some of the top stock car racers in all the land have congregated to Charlotte Motor Speedway to race in the longest race in all of motorsports, 600 miles, 970 kilometers, a race that has gone from daytime to evening and from nighttime all the way under the shining lights throughout its history. Tonight, the Major Series takes a page out of its history as part of this Memorial Day weekend event in the real world to see how the drivers fare in the 1987 cars here on iRacing. This is the World 600 here on GSRC. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's action here from America's home for racing, Charlotte Motor Speedway, for the 8th race of the European Region's Pro Split season. My name's Justin Prince. Alongside me in the booth today is Jake Sperry and Christian Challoner. Behind the scenes is our director, Zach Johnson, and he's using cameras provided by the great Dougie Beard. Now, when it comes to Charlotte, plenty of racing action has taken place here over the years, and plenty of history has taken place over the years. Let's learn more about its history with our GSRC track guide.
Welcome everybody to the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Even though it was built more than 4 decades ago, drivers still love to race at this 1.5-mile quad-shaped oval. Located just a short 13-mile drive from downtown, Charlotte also shares a similar track shape to what you would see at the Texas Motor Speedway and the Atlanta Motor Speedway as well. Despite turns 1 and 2 having the same banking as turns 3 and 4, the two ends of the speedway could not drive any different. Turn 1 and 2 are much more of a sweeping corner, really carrying the speed down into the corner and trying to get that hole shot out of turn 2 down the backstretch. Turns 3 and 4 drive much tighter than 1 and 2, really having to get the car to rotate in the middle of 3 and 4 to make your entry and your exit point. Getting a lap in around here in one piece usually requires some calm nerves and a patient foot. Charlotte was one of the first speedways to install lights around the facility, giving night racing a whole new berth. Charlotte is also known for its place in the perfect day of racing every Memorial Day acting as the caboose after the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indianapolis 500. If Daytona is the pinnacle of NASCAR racing, then Charlotte has to be just a bumper behind. Fans flock to the largest sports facility in the Southeast and NASCAR's home track. This has been our guide to the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Sit back and enjoy the show.
That was a look at our GSRC track guide for CMS. Now, Christian, today's track for the 1987 cars will be extremely nerve-wracking, to say the very least for some, as seen in the past with the series. What can you tell us about today's track here as we're at Legacy Charlotte?
Well, interesting difference with it being obviously the legacy track and 24 degrees of banking in the turns. Pretty much the de facto mile-and-a-half, I would say. It's the one that everybody knows if they know of mile-and-a-half racing. And yeah, a bit of an interesting curveball to use the older version of the track, which ironically is actually smoother than the newer version. So a little bit easier in that sense, but obviously a little bit less familiar given that the track isn't really ran in the legacy configuration much these days. It is very, very tricky still in this car. You kind of have that sort of quintessential Charlotte thing that you have going over the bump into turn one, which can really, really unsettle these 87 cars. And certainly I think we're going to see a lot of comers and goers in the race because it's very difficult to keep tires on this car.
We'll talk about that more later on in today's coverage as we take a look at how the standings are shaping up entering today, because so far Sean Campbell has been dominant for RSR by butt kicker. 163 points the advantage today over Dallas Pataska, with Jamie Conway, who started off strong with the victory, in third in the standings, 195 points back. Chris Barrett, Ross Banfield, the top five. Thomas Cope, keep in mind the winner at Daytona earlier this year with the next-gen machines, in sixth. Miguel Freitas, Dalvin Manerwich, along with Trevor Bobrovsky and David H. Baker, the top 10 in the pro standings. In Sportsman, meanwhile, it's Garen Bannon who continues to lead there for NRG Racing ES. His teammate Brian Broomstra looks to bring the boom, 28 points back entering today with 4 victories. Alexander Olsen is in third, with Boomquist, Holmner rounding out the top 5, separation 104 points. Then it's Edward Shelley, Alexander Wegert, along with Sam Shallow, Tom Guest. Rounding up the top 10 is Hawken Shirt. Separation amongst them, 186 points for an action-packed race for them today. Meanwhile, in Legends, those are for the drivers more than 60 years of age. That is David Baker, who leads the way with 1 top 5 in 7 starts. The rest of the drivers not full-time this season. Mark Redford, of note, is in the field today for what's expected to be a busy 600 miles, 400 laps here at Charlotte. When it comes to Legend Sport, a little bit tighter to say the least when it comes to that pack, because Shirt has a 24-point advantage over Jan Brony from Dart Frogs Racing. Then it's Miguel Hagstrom, Claude Bavel, along with Gary Thomas, the top 5. Then it's Stefan Wayne, Andy Banfield, Wolf Dietrich Hotho, along with Simon Thorns and Nicholas Grum, rounding out the top 10, 432 points, the separation top to bottom. And that brings us into the team standings today, Jake, where one team's expect to be the favorite in, ironically enough, the 1987 cars, the drivers at the top of the standings.
Yeah, they certainly are, and it is an interesting pro division at the moment because it is a case of one versus the other. Satellite Racing, Apex Tech Racing Pro. It's been a game of give and take from these two teams, and I think it's going to be an interesting battle all the way to the end of the season. Grizzly TFR Le Mans, they find themselves in third position, but they are a full 367 points back, so a little bit out of the way. Fourth position then overall is the HW Racing team, and they're ahead of Grizzly TFR Daytona in fifth, and then effectively it is one team entries and a little bit less than that. Moving on down, Team Mad in sixth position, Udox Oliver in seventh. Following that is RSR by Butt Kicker, Leo Racing Team, and then T3 Motorsport rounding out then the top 10 with 329 points. And over in sports as well, we've been keeping a very close eye on the sportsman's battles because the top 10 over in the driver's standings is dominated by the top 2 teams overall here, which is NRG Racing ES and Bright Esports. Just a 30-point gap between them in that huge battle. Hanson Brothers Racing in third, holding their own scrap right now with Grizzly TFR Spa and the Black Tree Race Crew in fifth position. The Apex Racing Group find themselves sixth. They're holding off the two-car battles between No Emission Motorsports and Racing Turtles. Udox Daisy is in ninth position, and the Bright Esports by Glacial rounds out the top 10 in that category. And I certainly cannot wait for racing to go along 400 laps here today, Justin.
Let's take a look at the race details in turn, Christian. As mentioned, 400 laps today, and this could be a long night, and for some, because this is a track that eats up the tires.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, 400 lap race, the longest stock car race pretty much going, and especially with the 87 car, where it's not much slower than the modern car, but you know, it will make it an even longer race. It's an even tougher race. The car being much harder to drive to some extent. 40 incident limit, don't think we're going to see anyone get out to that, if I'm completely honest. It is open setup with one spare car, and the open setup aspect is going to be really, really interesting tonight, because this car is very subjective in how long it kind of makes the tires last just in driving, and you can certainly skew it one way or the other to being, you know, either extremely tight and burning off the right front, or extremely loose and burning off the right rear in setup as well. So I do think that we're going to see a lot of people move around, and I really think we'll see a big transition with cars as we go from day to night.
Keep in mind as well, 12 tire sets in the pit lane as well, which could make things intriguing as the day goes on and the night goes on in turn. Final practice currently underway, and the number 69 machine of Delvin Munirwich, currently at the top of the board, has put in more than 130 laps already. Already leading this session in turn by more than a tenth of a second. That's after major improvements throughout the session over Thomas Cope, Dallas Pataska, Ryan Wachaleski, and Cordell Colon, the top five. A stellar practice session for the 69.
It's a stellar session, but at the end of the day, what does this session actually mean at the end of it? It's great that you've got one lap pace. It's great that you're top of the practice times, but at the end of the day, the stopwatch only works so much when it comes to oval style racing. I think it's learned a lot from us here in the booth that when it comes to a race like this, any given Sunday, I think, is the right opportunity to say you can go and win this race. I've seen races around this. In fact, it was a few years ago, I do believe it was, that someone won this World 600 starting dead last on the grid. So I think it's very much a case of opportunities can happen here around this place today, where however cautions fall, however the race strategy comes into play, you can go from last position to first. Anybody in this field has a shot of victory. Fastest time on the board gives you the best quote-unquote possible chance to go out there and win the event.
And remember, drivers are already setting the qualifying times through pre-qualifying for this event. I'd like to take the time to remind you of the charity being supported by today's race, the World 600. Sarge's Place, once more. North Olympic Regional Veterans Housing Network is a non-profit serving Callum and Jefferson counties on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington State. They offer homeless services to those who have served our country, whether in peacetime or at war. For more information or to donate, go to sargesveteransupport.com. And as the drivers complete the final moments of practice here, let's talk about these conditions in turn, because we mentioned the expectation of a lot of fall off, about a second and a half over the course of about, give or take, 7 to 8 laps. That's a lot of fall off, even with the track temperature being as cool as it is at 90 degrees Fahrenheit today, Christian.
Yeah, the big thing is going to be really keeping the tires on it for those long runs. I mean, if it went green, which, you know, 400 laps going green, it's possible. And if it did, you'd have to be doing 66 laps a run. And that's going to be really, really difficult just to keep the tires on the car. I mean, it's going to be difficult to even do 50 lap runs, I think. And once you get out to about 30 to 40 laps into a run, that's when we're really going to see who's actually in trouble in that regard and who's actually got a really good long run car. But on the flip side of that, you can gain quite a bit of short run pace by sacrificing that long run, and with the track temps dropping, the rubber going down as the race goes on, it's going to move to favor towards those cars. And obviously if we get a late race restart, it's going to move heavily in their favor. So you do have to be careful what you go for. There's not really a lot of point in having a car that's particularly amazing at the start of the race, but obviously you do need to survive those first couple of runs.
It's been talked about, especially with those tires. It's worth noting from the international split, some of the notes forwarded over from that side. You can push, but you have to pit around 20 laps. That is not a lot of laps, of course. You can turn in that matter. But as we get ready for today's race, Jake, your opinions on who some of the favorites are, in your opinion?
But I think it comes down to who can hold themselves in the best stead with the tyres. They only get those 12 sets of course, and they need to be averaging 33 1/3 laps per set to make the 400 laps. So I think it comes down to who is going to be the calmest when it comes to holding their tyres. And I just want to point out one driver who managed to find a win at Daytona against the odds, and that was the 64 of Thomas Cope. I think that the Olympus car, which is down on pit road right now, has the opportunity to go and do so again. And there aren't many drivers who can say that they have won Daytona and they have won at Charlotte in the same season.
Your counterpoint, Christian.
Well, I don't really have one, to be honest. I mean, I think Thomas Cope has been very, very strong on ovals, and obviously Daytona was able to come away with it. Dallas Pataska always strong, but then you think Sean Campbell has been really the standout driver in the Euro region this year. It is ovals, it is a little bit outside of his comfort zone, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to just go against him on that.
The drivers now finishing up the final moments of practice, on Norwich leading the way in the session over Campbell, Cope, Pataska, Wasilewski. The separation amongst them about 0.3 of a second. But now it's time for race time. Overall, a grand total of 18 drivers making it to the field today. Dallas Pataska setting the pole time in pre-qualifying over Alexander Russell. They'll be starting on the front row. Row 2, Ross Banfield and Sean Campbell. Ross Banfield looking to bounce back after a very rough Daytona earlier this year. David H. Baker starts in row 3 alongside Trevor Bobrovsky. In row 4, it's Cordell Colon and Mark Redford with the start. Starts in 8th. Ryan Wasilewski was very quick in practice, but starts in 9th after not as great of a qualifying run. With Travis Henderson, your top 10 today, Jake.
Yes, over to row 6, and that's where you find David Melnarovich there with Julien Giant in 12th position. Jamie Conway, surprisingly down the order, will be going from 13th in the 42 machine. Miguel Freitas will be with him on the outside of row 7. Row 8 will see, I think, 2 drivers to keep an eye out on in this race. Elvis Bonello and Thomas Cope, both of them not having the best qualifying, but this is the sort of field where you can make places through this one today. Tom Dreiling starts 17th. And the last of the 18 runners here today, Cristiano Roca, looking to try and really run forward and get as much possible. Pace car already taking its run forward here today. 400 laps, and crucial thing to remember towards the end of the race here, Justin, 400 laps, and there are no green-white checkers because there weren't green-white checkers in 1987.
Indeed, there weren't back in that time. Keys to victory here tonight as 17 cars have taken the rolling, Christian, for the pace lap. How do you win the World 600?
You survive until there's 50 laps to go, and then you hope that you've set your car up for the last 50, and you can, if you're at the back, you can drive forwards. Obviously, ideally, you'd be at the front anyway, and you'd be stronger than the guys around you. So I certainly think it's a race of survival, especially for the first 300, even the first 350 laps. So survive to that point, maybe get a caution around that point, and then that's when you have to press on and really hope that your car's got what you need for that last 50 laps of the race.
Tonight's coverage presented by Majors Garage, home of free baseline plus setups. Find our special discount code MajorsGSRC for 10% off down to the link in the description down below, or find out more by going to majorsgarage.com. It's time to go racing for the World 600 from Charlotte. Dallas Pataska on the loud pedal. Green flag is out. We're underway. And a great launch for Dallas Pataska off the jump. He leads by 5 car lengths over Alexander Russell. The battle is on, though, for about 7th and 8th on back. Cordo Colon, Travis Henderson, still side by side for the past lap.
And still there trying to find that move, and ultimately it's a case of everyone's gone single file to start, not too untoward, and it's about finding a place in the train. Cordell Cologne nowhere to go, and Wasilewski up on the high side now is going to try and slot into line off the exit of 4. He will take that place, and suddenly he might get a good run using that little bit of a dip off of the banking. It gives him a good chance going towards 1. Fastest lap, 32 flat. Don't pay too much attention to it. Dallas Pataska at the front is flying on the tyres early.
That's to be expected, but one driver that's kept it pretty calm throughout all this, Wasilewski, who's currently still in the 9th spot. Expecting some big things from him as well, because it's not just Pataska who is considered the favorite we talked about, Christian. It's the team's cars for Satellite Racing. Expect to be quick throughout the day today. You see them trying to get around, for example, Wasilewski. In this case, the brick wall, that is the Grizzly TFR cars.
Yeah, and I do expect that he's going to move forwards, but he just has to be careful with how quickly he tries to move forwards, you know. There's really nothing to be gained by being at the front this early in the race. Obviously, the main goal is to make sure that you don't go a lap down early on, and at the moment it looks like Alexander Russell has kind of got everybody just packed up a little bit behind him, but I think that will pay dividends when he gets to about 15 laps into the run. If you push hard in the first 10, you take so much out of the tire that it just really punishes you all the way to the end. Ross Banfield almost getting in the back of Russell there in the middle of turn 2.
Bit of a checkup now for that pack. Russell trying to park the bus, has Paul Bliss up in the box for him today. Someone that has experience with low-line racing on the technical side of the world. And Christian, of course, that camp also with a lot of experience when it comes to sim racing. When you think about that name and some of the drivers a part of that camp. Here he is right here, in fact. You see him nice and happy in a Satellite Racing shirt.
Yeah, and that's certainly going to help him out, especially as the race goes on. And with the 87, there isn't many things you can do in terms of adjustment in race, but one of them, which is pretty powerful, is air pressure. And you can actually make some pretty big changes. You can make the car quite a bit easier to drive at the beginning of the run if you go up on air pressure. The downside is you're going to lose quite a bit of short run pace, but the big thing that you've got to keep an eye on is sliding either the right front or the right rear, and just shuffling air pressures around can make a surprisingly big difference. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to watch out for and see if people keep on top of. Even if we see a car that looks pretty evil at the beginning of the race, don't anticipate that it will necessarily be evil at the end of the race. It might actually be pretty much dead on to what you want.
Meanwhile, several battles underway. Wasilewski passing some of the Grizzly TFR cars. Campbell also jumping past Ross Banfield for 3rd position just now. And it looks like some of the drivers who want to maintain the patience also don't want to lose too much time to Pataska here, Jake, and that's the tough thing. You don't want to end up getting too far back to the race leader, because then you have to push your tires to get back up there in the long term.
It's a game of give and take, and here comes the give and take from Sean Campbell, who's been tired of sitting about for the opening 8 laps, wants to try and make that run to the inside, and has done very well and has managed it. I am curious on Pataska's times overall, how the drop-off has been so far, and as far as the 2nd lap, which is the quickest, the first real lap, 32 flat, it's already down to a 32.7, so I don't think it's as much as a second and a half over the course of 7 to 8 laps. I think we're going to be seeing a drop off about 0.7 of a second if you're pushing.
Take a look at Wasilewski meanwhile, as Wasilewski has caught up to the rest of the other teams here, trying to get around Bobrovsky. And we're clearing on by, in fact, in the battle for position. Already 10 laps started this time around, coming up to the end of lap 10. Wasilewski, your biggest mover so far, with this pattern up 4 positions so far.
It's good movement here at this point. 4 positions gained, has flying up through the field, and he's wanting to try and dice through the train. He's got through the difficult bit, which is the TFR cars, the TFR cars, and the TFR cars again, which all find themselves there trying to work. Now, the difficulty he has in front is he's got a very, very aggressive Ross Banfield. He was aggressive, of course, at Daytona, found himself getting a lot of incident points after Daytona, but he now has to just be patient here, because when you're too wide here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, it is very difficult to find the pass. But Russell on the outside line, on the wrong groove, he's going to be hoping that he gets himself a little bit more help to get himself through this race, because he and the very, very nice machine that he's got available underneath him right now is certainly hoping that, at least in these early stages, it's okay to lose places with everyone running green and having a quiet time of things at the moment. And keep an eye a little bit further back. Thomas Cope trying to bridge up to the back of the group in 13th position to Malnarovic, who finds himself in 12th.
Wachowski also zipping on by for 3rd position on the bottom, making it look easy as Russell holds on to 5th position for the time being. And what can you adjust Double C when it comes to the pit lane? What can your crew chief do, Christian?
Well, like I said, it's primarily air pressure. I mean, you can make quite a big difference. If you go too low, actually, on right side air, it can make the car really, really loose, which is perhaps not instinctively what people would think, but you know, there is performance there. So it's kind of a bit of a balancing act between how low can you still drive the car and maintain, you know, especially good long run, because if you go too low on the right side air, you really start to slide the tires, especially the right rear, and that's really, really difficult actually to, you know, deal with as a driver, because this is not much you can do. The car inherently will drive that way. But what I'm interested in here is watching the difference between Russell and Wachowski as this run goes on, because I suspect they're on the same car here, and obviously they've driven it very, very differently. Wachowski is really prioritized going forwards, whereas Russell doesn't really look like he's pushed the car at all. And we're not at the point where it's about to invert yet in terms of, you know, those two driving style differences and approaches. But I think within the next 5 to 15 laps, we'll start to see. I suspect Wachowski's kind of forward march will stall out, and we'll start to see Russell actually gaining on him again.
Battle for 4th now up for grabs again. Meanwhile, Russell is wanting to push, it looks like, under the 777. Banfield putting lots of wheel into that machine up at the top. Russell, though, still can't find a way around. Not an easy battle, to say the least. Banfield giving a little bit of a squeeze here. Russell still trying to get the run.
Been some really good work, Chevrolet versus Chevrolet, as they run forward over the front stripe. 4 of your top 5 at the moment are Chevrolets. The one difference is Sean Campbell in 2nd, riding about in a Buick, and a little slidey goes Banfield, gets himself down underneath and holds himself in that position in 4th. So really making it all work. But again, it's about patience here on lap 16. They are running in the hotter conditions. These are the tougher conditions out there for the tyre as well. And you'd probably get to a position of understanding where you can say, this race is only going to get easier as this race goes on for tyre conservation and tyre life, because when the track gets cooler, you run faster, and it means that you're not using as much of the tyre as you go around.
Still side by side too, as there it goes. Russell back up to the 4th spot indeed. But I've noticed this as well. A little bit of a nemesis is built up for the back bumper of Campbell as you see the air shuffling up through the pack. Wachowski, we mentioned that charge from that 86. Well, he's been a bit of a nemesis to the back bumper of Campbell. He's nearly hit the back bumper twice this fight.
And I'm a little bit surprised he's been so aggressive so early on. Obviously, yeah, the first run is the hardest on the tires. So taking this approach that Wachowski has to seemingly try to drive himself all the way to the lead, I don't know. I think by the time he gets 40 laps in, he's going to be really, really hurting. And he might have to pit considerably earlier than everybody else. Ideally, on this first run, I think you want to get out to at least lap 50 if you can make it. I would try and run the tank out personally, but lap 50 is where you can pit without really being at a major strategy disadvantage. If you're having to come in earlier than that, it's going to be difficult. You're going to be very substantially off cycle, I think.
And way up towards the wall, in fact, as there's the lap 20 mark coming up this time. Banfield struggling a bit here, though, Jake. That 777 for you, Docs, is under attack by just about everybody. Nearly up into Bobrovsky as he clears nearly on the outside.
Well, Bobrovsky was nearly in the wall at 2 that lap through, and then Ross Banfield's deciding that he's going to dictate how much pace he's got. If the car's feeling loose now, later on in this run here to lap 20, then he's going to be really struggling. He'll pay the price for his early aggressiveness, trying to scrap it out with the likes of Alexander Russell up there, and suddenly to the inside goes Mark Redford, the Legends driver, trying to get this sorted and move on up another position. And there is no substitute when it comes to racing like this, Justin, for experience. Mark Redford has that in spades, and at this point in time, he'll be looking to move up, is in 6th position. He's using that experience, not just of old car, old driver, but also saying that you've got to learn a few tricks from our era of racing.
Indeed, indeed. Looking out behind them once again, that is Miguel Freitas still trying to sort things out of the 999. That is Monterwood who led the way in practice, clearing on by. And that point you made, Jake, about practice to race pace difference, really coming into spades here with the fall off already 1 second.
Yeah, and it's true that you can run really quick and you can do a nice few couple laps, but long distance pace, I think, trumps everything. And I think we've been seeing that actually from the way Wasilewski's been driving. He wanted to move up into 2nd position, and actually he is clawing that gap back to Dallas Pataska. Around lap 3, lap 4, that gap was 1.5 seconds. That gap has effectively been cut in half right now, is around 0.7 of a second. So it certainly has been that over this stint, they've been working that gap back. And car 23, who has had the lead for the entirety of this one, of course, took it off of the pole position, is now going to slowly get worked back here the longer that this goes on. And they're about in range, you would say, for, okay, you're going to have to be patient, you're going to have to work through what is a tough phase right now. Lap 20 towards lap 30, I think, is going to be the tough phase of how you go through a stint.
And keep in mind, the major thing, and I think you can speak on this behalf too, Christian, is when you're the leader, you get to dictate your own pace in some circumstance when you have a gap like Pataska's, which gives you a buffer to save compared to those like, say, Wasilewski even, where if he backs down and Campbell doesn't, Campbell's there to pass.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that the pace right now is actually fairly conservative. I know we're obviously only 24 laps in, but everybody stayed relatively connected all the way through the field. I mean, even back to Tom Dreiling, who is the last car still running, 17th. He's only 9 seconds off the lead, which when you consider that that's 17 cars back, you usually get a separation distance of about 1 second. That's quite close. The field has stayed closer than I thought it would be, which is why I think there's some kind of conservation going on, especially for most drivers. I don't think Pataska is showing us his full pace right now, but I don't know. I feel like Wasilewski's about to drop like a rock once we get past, say, 30, 35 laps. I just don't see how he can maintain this pace and not really struggle to complete this run.
International had drivers fall off big time around lap 40 as well to emphasize that point. So that is right around the final quarter or so of the run expected here today. Give a shout out to the battle for 13th that's been going on. Julian John currently leading the group in the stack-up machine. But Thomas Kolb, Albus Bonello, Jamie Conway have been battling back and forth like a pendulum swing all throughout, as Bonello tries to invade the space of the Olympus Esports car on the bottom.
I think it was quite telling, as now Bonello will have the preferred line through 1 and 2. It was quite telling when Thomas Cope was trying to bridge up to that front train, that inaugural train, that he has completely dropped back like a stone. And now, all of a sudden, that battling through 1 and 2, Bonello unable to make the move. Suddenly, you pull out 5-6 car lengths for Julien Jean, and it's a case of goodbye and good night. You're going to have to be waiting now a long time to get that back. Again, Cope working well on the top side, getting things sorted. He will have Charles Boschel in his ears, his pit crew, giving him a few instructions on the outside. And there's trouble down on the infield then. going forward, that would be Tom Dreiling. And crucially, because it happened on the apron there, Justin, no reason for a yellow flag to be thrown out there. There was no car around him either. So we stay green here at Charlotte.
So Tom Dreiling, who was 9 seconds back, is now 23 seconds back. Not how Tom wanted this day to go in turn. Meanwhile, that battle we were keeping up with, Benella just about knocked the wall down, trying to hold off Jamie Conway. Conway has made the pass up to 15th.
It surprised with Jamie Conway that he didn't really kind of go forwards. I did expect that he would drive forwards a bit, but it's just not really happened. I wonder if he's just been...
Oh, Tom's done it again!
Tom Dreiling spinning on the apron again. I think he's definitely going to have to come down to pit road this time. It looks like he's just out of tire.
Tom Dreiling still is trying to keep it going despite that. This is his 99th Major Series start. And this is not how you want start 99 to go.
99 problems here, Justin, but keeping it in a straight line apparently is one of the problems that are there in this race. He is really struggling 2 laps in a row, and one of the things that you'll be worried about when you go and make a mistake is making the same mistake twice, and it's exactly a carbon copy. Just the back end getting loose, back around it goes, and unable to get it sorted. Able to keep it slowed down during that slide, so he's really there, but those tires are absolutely gone right now for Tom Dreiling, and he knows he's in trouble right now because let's not forget here, Justin, they've got to make it 33 and a third laps around to make it to 400. He's already a lap down. At this rate, he will not have enough tires to make it home. He needs to make it another 2 to 3 laps, and he is right up on the top end of the circuit here with no tire.
I don't think he still realizes somehow he has no tire. He's nearly spun it 3 laps in a row. He's going full speed again in the same corner. And again, nearly spins it out. This time you have to pit, right? Right?
Surely, yeah,
there he goes.
He's coming down. He's clearly got no right, rear, left. And this is about the point in the run where you start to get bit by that really, really hard if you do have that problem. And we haven't really seen it happen to anyone else yet. But I feel like it's going to happen. He's the first one to have the problem of having no right, rear, left, but he certainly won't be the last.
I will just add in, Julien Gion, I think, is about to be the next. He nearly spun it off of 2.
You know who might also be in the midst for a battle to form up, though? That race lead. Wasilewski is closing on Pataska here. Pataska's better in 3 and 4, Christian, but Wasilewski much better in 1 and 2.
Yeah, I'm still surprised that Wasilewski's been able to maintain this pace. I really thought he'd be one of the cars that was really, really struggling with the right rear. And for me personally, it's the 3 and 4 end of the track that's really destroying the right rear. Actually, through 1 and 2, it's not so bad. But the 3 and 4 end of the track is very, very brutal on it. So you can kind of push through 1 and 2 and then take it easy through 3 and 4 and kind of have a halfway house on, saving the tire a little bit but not giving up too much pace. But Wasilewski doesn't look unstable through 3 and 4 right now. In fact, if anything, he looks like he's tight.
Yeah, I've seen him nearly hit towards the wall a few times. Let's take a look at a lap comparison this time around. Starting up lap 35, you see the difference. Going back and forth now, where gain, 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 lost time, gain. It's now down to 1/4 of a second.
Well, 1/4 of a second now, and Daz Pataska for the first time is going to have to be defensive. They're on lap 35 now of their stint, so you could say they are looking to be in the tyre wheelhouse at this point. And the question's going to be whether they want to run tyre limited or fuel limited out there on track. Good battle behind as well as Ross Banfield and Travis Henderson continue on their scrap at this point in time for what is 7th and 8th position in this race. But the question is going to be, do you want to be tyre limited or fuel limited? Of course, fuel, they can go 60 to 70 laps on their fuel. Tyres a lot less. So the question is, do you really want to be putting 60 to 70 laps worth of fuel in the car to go out there and do your stint? Or do you want to put 30, 40, 50 laps of fuel in that stint, run a lighter car, knowing that's as far as the tire's going to let you go?
But that's not as simple as an open wheel car, right, Christian?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you don't want to be in a situation where you're tire limited. I always prefer to run as long as I can on fuel if possible. And certainly being tire limited is not great because you just don't really have any options. You know, if you're fuel limited, you can change up what you're doing. You can either run longer, you can run shorter, and it's not really a problem. It's just situational as to what's best for you. If you're tire limited and you literally can't do more than 50 laps, what happens if you get to the end of the race and the last run's 60 laps? Well, you've got nothing, you know. Like, you're gonna have to try and do something, drive probably extremely slowly for the first 15-20 laps to make that work. So I think this first run is especially interesting to me because I want to see who looks tire limited, because that will be a factor if we get to the end of the race and we get a caution with, say, 65 or 60 laps to go.
Still, Wasilewski staying within about half a second of the race leader. But Erwich and Freitas are starting to lose ground, it's worth noting, for the lead pack as this fall-off hits the major cliffing point. Already up to nearly a second and a half, some of the drivers having their fall-off rates going out.
And the fallout, I think, is really big. Thomas Cope, I think, has been the big one. He's now down 7 seconds to Elvis Bonello because the tyres are literally just off the back, side by side for second then, and how close do you want to get as Ryan Wasilewski will lose out then to Sean Campbell's Buick going through, and suddenly sneaking up back into this group is Alexander Russell, who's been very quiet on that stint, was conservative, remember, early on, Justin, on that opening run, and suddenly it's starting to come back to him here with the 27. I think it's just been some great tyre management that has brought the 27 back into the late stages of this opening stint.
He's been waiting patiently for a good long while in this pit stop underway. It's Wasilewski. And that's a little earlier than expected. 41 laps into the run.
I did think that he might be one of the first to struggle, but it looks like he's actually going for a strategy play here. I've got to feel like he was just committed to doing 40-lap runs, and that's why he was going hard. He knew he could do 40. He had no intention of doing more than that, but that's, you know, an 8-stint strategy, whereas if you're fuel limited, it's about a 6 or a 7 as a car's in the wall. Codal Cologne.
Oh, a bunch of people are starting to struggle with tires. Cologne, Thomas Cope. Cologne is into the pit lane, getting on in below speed. Thomas Cope has mandatory damage repairs and has blown a tire in the 64. So a lot of trouble starting to break out at lap 41 and coming around to lap 43 now.
And it's going to be a long stop as well for everyone. Ross Banfield still there on the inside, and as everybody struggles, I'm amazed that everyone's kept it in order, has kept this race green so far for the opening 43 laps of this race. Pataska in control, Campbell second, but this mid-pack suddenly looks feisty. Banfield, Henderson, Pavrovsky, and David H. Baker, they'll all be in conversation with each other, the TFR cars. The last thing they'll want to do is effectively run into each other out there on circuit, because they know that they've got a really good day of teams points hauls with not many drivers taking to this challenge today around the Charlotte Motor Speedway for the World 600.
Battle still on for 5th. There goes the switch under for Henderson. 2 by 2 now for positions with Baker under attack with Bobrovsky. Now looking on the inside, still the 24. Chevy on Chevy. Henderson clear. Ross Banfield nearly loops it. Holds on to it once, twice, 3 times on the bubble.
Yeah, his right rear is definitely gone. I won't be surprised if we see him pit within the next lap or 2.
Yeah, this is a major, major trouble spot. Thomas Cope, penalty speeding, has a lengthy penalty. Bonello has jumped in the pit. There goes the tire.
It's just on a knife edge, Justin. You can just trying to think, have you got grip? Have you got grip? You're almost looking back at that rear right tire going, do you still have anything left? And when it says no, you just got to hold on to it, because there is nothing you can do when you are completely out of opportunities there to go through. Elvis Bonello as well has come into the pits then for a stop. And just for comparison on what time's being done by Wasilewski on new tyres, he's doing 32.5. He's only 0.4 quicker than Dallas Pataska. So it just goes to show you how well the pace is from the front when they're running pretty consistently in times. I was not expecting 0.4 of a difference.
estimated to take a full fuel fill of about 16 seconds. Based on international data, it's worth noting. Wasilewski, the first of those, pitting, of course, by 4 seconds now. But this is a major undercut compared to the race leaders, Pataska, Campbell, Russell, and company. How does this play out as the major thing long term?
Oh, Henderson.
Oh, there he goes. Down to the bottom, holding on to it. Henderson avoids the wall, trying to get to the speed limit as another car spins it. It's Bobrovsky for the first caution.
And that, again, is on the grit. And the one thing you need to practice isn't just in terms of this race. Bobrovsky's got to go around another lap. Is not just coming down in on the pits. It's coming down in on the pits, Justin, when the tire's down. And that is something that you don't often get to do when you're out there practicing.
And that was going to be the next question towards that way. How do you enter the pit lane on the older tires? Well, we've gotten the answer. You better hold on, because you may go for a ride. Especially with that transition to the apron, Christian.
Yeah, it's always kind of been a difficult pit lane to get onto, and obviously doubly so when you've got absolutely no tire at all. And you know, he actually got down to the apron, and then it was when he was on the flat that it went away from him. Good decision though here, where he chose not to go into pit road and actually went back around. If he'd, well, the irony of it is that he closed his own pit lane by being the caution, but he avoids the penalty by actually going around.
Lucky dogs are enabled, so Wasilewski getting that lucky dog, it appears. We're under caution for the first time today at lap 48 now. And Pataska keeps the track position. He, Campbell, Russell, Redford, Baker. On with Malerwich, Freitas, Conway, Gion, and Bobrovsky. All did not enter the pit lane. Travis Henderson did take a pit stop, but has to take the wave around in this circumstance. So Henderson will also be back on the lead lap. That pins Cologne, Banfield, Bonello, Cope, and Dreiling laps or several laps down in some circumstances.
And let's just remember as well, this is going to be a longer pit stop than what is traditional on a regular NASCAR pit stop, because of course they've got less crew there than what they would essentially have, and they've got to jack up both tires and then put the fuel as well in as they do so. Away they go, about a 20-second stop there. But Dallas Pataska comfortably gets out and away. Russell jumping Campbell in the stop, and I tell you what, it was a pretty good stop as well. I would have to say, for Mark Redford, who finds himself now into 4th position. So some good pit stops going through here at Charlotte.
I was about to say, long run, Redford quietly was one of the quickest drivers on the track. He was within 2 seconds of the leader after being in the midst of the Hornet's Nest for much of the start of the run. So that strategy of back it down, keep it conservative for the end of the run worked out really well for Redford.
Yeah, it absolutely does. If you commit to it and you don't get drawn into a battle, especially if you know you're going to try and get to the end of a full tank, I do think it's the way to go. And drivers who didn't do that, Wasilewski obviously committed to that 40-lap strategy. Yeah, he was fast, but he's now really behind the 8 ball because he's going to have to do this restart on old tires. He doesn't have the advantage of obviously, you know, having that undercut that he would have done. It's kind of gone against him because he now needs to pit earlier than everybody else, and he's got worse tires. This next run's going to be difficult for him.
And don't forget Mark Redford, one of the original iRacers from 2009, in fact, based out of the UK. And amongst those who has experience at the top levels in organized racing, EGX Arena comes to mind, for example. On top of running in various different oval races.
And just having that opportunity when you have oval race experience, it's invaluable because it means that you know how more predictable other drivers are going to be. You understand all of those tropes, and when you get a multifaceted series like this that runs road and oval in all sorts of different machines, it just makes that getting up to speed process a whole lot quicker, Justin.
Funnily enough, one of those he won 2021 Season 2 for the field fillers for Winston Cup action in this car at the time. Wave arounds coming around. Double file restarts indicated by race admins. Drawling also taking a wave to get 2 laps down. Cope doing the same. Banfield and Benell back to the lead lap. So that means Vataska, who's led them all so far, in control of the pack, coming up to 349 laps to go. And so far, Vataska, no mistakes, the 23. Can he keep that up is the major question, Christian.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially as we were kind of saying, the goal is not to really be leading the race right now. It's to survive until the end of the race.
I meant the survival part.
Well, I think he can. I mean, he survived the first run, and that's really the most difficult run, as we were saying. So I think the next question is, how much easier is the second run and every subsequent run from this point out on the tires? And some of the drivers who are struggling to get even 40 laps out, if they still aren't able to get out to, say, 50, it's going to be difficult.
The reason mentioning that question, he was a dominating factor of the World 600 years ago and was involved in crashes from the lead. He's off and away with a good launch. Sean Campbell with a great launch as well to second. Alexander Russell battling with Mark Redford for third holds on, while Jamie Conway looks to hold on, who gained a ton of spots as a result of that caution, as, oh boy, Redford scraping the wall.
Oh, you can't get much closer than that. Redford absolutely pushing then off of this restart, and everyone getting themselves back into position then and trying to work out, okay, we got fresh tires, we can go out, we can be aggressive again. And speaking of aggressive, needs to be aggressive early. Ryan Wasilewski already side by side in the middle of the pack. You'll have Henderson around him, Julian Gion just in front as well, who was struggling a little bit towards the end of the stint. It now becomes a case of, well, front 4, 5 are away. Everyone else, apparently in the pack, has decided, you know what, it's battle stations.
Still bumper to bumper there. Here's a look at the battle referring to Wasilewski. Up to 11th with the dive. Henderson, the next car up. As well as Miguel Freitas, who's up 5 spots from the time of the caution flag. This is not going to be easy for Wasilewski, especially with his teammate running the fast laps up front again. Wasilewski trying different lines here with a lot of wiggles still. Freitas up at the top. Down to the bottom, side by side, is Travis Henderson.
Yeah, this is kind of what you don't want to see if you're trying to cut through the pack. You don't want to see other people attempting to make passes ahead of you, because, like, where does he go really here? He has to rely on Henderson clearing Freitas, which he has, but then he's got to make his own move. And it can just check you up if you just got a ton of side-by-side happening ahead of you.
Well, the side-by-side did back up a little bit, so that allows them to regroup. But guess what? It's another Grizzly TFR brick wall. And that's not to say that's a slight towards them at all. Keep in mind, they're one of the more established teams, Grizzly TFR, in this series, because originally they had 2 organizations, Jake. Grizzly Motorsports and Torque Freak Racing. When some drivers pulled back their commitments, but also the teams wanted to stay committed, they combined their efforts for the major series and became Grizzly TFR around a few years ago, about 2-3 years ago now.
Yeah, there's been some really good mergers actually in sim racing and motorsport, and I think a lot of the times when you get people who are committed and want to work together, having that merger is going to be crucial. I think one of the greatest mergers I think sim racing ever had was the merger of Pure Motorsport and Team Redline. I think when it came to sim racing, that was absolutely huge, and they're still reaping the rewards right now. Every time they go into a sim racing event that is endurance style, Team Redline are one of the favorites, if not the favorites, to go out and win every time they race. Why? Because they've got the pedigree of Pure Motorsport, or when that was a team together, and they still have that core, the likes of Maximilian Benecca and Gianni Vecchio. And I think it's the same here with Grizzly TFR. They have drivers in their team capable of going out, making good results happen for them, because they've had that experience, and having an experience in this sort of series means that you are up to date and you can stay with the flow of the times in a series like this.
As that discussion's gone on, Wasilewski's cut by 3 of those 4 cars. One of those cars has dropped back in Cologne. And we'll say Redford's still holding his own in that main pack in 4th position. Still in the midst of this pack, Ross Banfield amongst those trying to figure out a way around. Thomas Cope and Tom Drowling, lap traffic mind you, are battling for the lucky dog right in front of the 777.
Yeah, this is where you really just don't want to be at this stage of the race. It's a bit of a hornet's nest right now, and I think everybody's just got to kind of stay calm about it, because it is still very, very early in the race, and this is where you can easily wipe out 6 or 7 cars with just a slight mistake from someone. So little surprise right there. That's the kind of thing I was talking about.
Cologne up into the wall. Caution flag is out the 50. Sent hard into the wall as a tire rolls away.
That's a heavy hit there for Cordell Cologne, and that is what you absolutely don't want. Cologne was in front of the group, checked up, actually, for Julien Gion in front, and Thomas Cope, the 2-lap down machine, was just not alert to it enough there, and ultimately that's the hit that sends the machine hard into the outside wall. And as we say, cautions bring out other cautions, and that ultimately, for the TFR car, is not what you were hoping to see, and 3 wheels on my wagon able to bring it back into the pits.
That's the fast repair right there. Let's take a look. Remember the battle for the Lucky Dog right behind. Wow. And the tire win a good full 2 corners trying to find the pit lane for a new car.
Brake's still hot on it.
Yeah.
It's never good when you get overtaken by your own wheel.
Take a look at this up top again.
Yeah, I mean, it does check up on entry a bit, but the 64 trying to make that outside pass just wasn't expecting it, and obviously got in the back of him and really, really just unsettled him, turned him around, and did correct the initial slide, but the overcorrect straight into the fence completely destroyed the car.
So under caution, Cologne does maintain the lead lap with the fast repair, but Ross Banfield electing to pit this time. Everybody else is staying within the line currently with the iRacing pace car. So the 777 in for service. And an early time to do it, the field had only ran about 12-13 laps that run, including the pace laps, so about 10 under speed, full speed.
But with the rate in which that they're pitting, with the 12 tyres that they've got, the runs that they were doing, it was about 43, 44 laps when that first caution came out, and a little bit longer. That ultimately meant that on that run, they are well within the range to get themselves going. Ross Banfield, in terms of his position, isn't actually losing that much track position. He's losing maybe track position to Cordell Cologne, and that's it. So it's not too much of a risk, I would say, Justin, for someone like him to come into the pits, because ultimately he's going to be in the same position regardless of whether he pitted or didn't pit.
One suggestion, by the way, for features to forward: the ability to fall on the replay whenever a tire comes loose, just the tire. You know, just isolate the tire. It becomes its own vehicle in the cameras, and you're racing the tire. Or more so, following along with the tire, so you can sing the infamous Loose Wheel song. That's
So
a joke.
You want all the tires like trackable and as a camera? I mean,
If they come loose, it's a joke. It's a bad one.
I mean, it sucks when it happens to you and like the wheel comes off, but as a spectator, it is always quite amusing watching a car being overtaken by its own tire.
Yes, indeed. And be able to sing on top of things. Give credit to Conway. He's still holding on to 5th amongst all this, but for how long? Apex Tech Racing's machine has had some struggles in the Buick. And give a shout out to the Buick, because that car, a lot of work put in with Dale Jr. in particular, and believe as well with a certain person that's in our booth.
Yeah, we did some work on these. I feel like it's about a year ago now. Was that when we had the 87 car update? I would say the Buick is kind of the additional. We started off with the Thunderbird and the Monte Carlo, and then the Buick came later. And I really like the Buick. I mean, I'm driving the Thunderbird myself, just really because of the paint scheme on it. But the Buick, I didn't really know too much about it, but it is a pretty cool looking car.
Keep in mind, it was talked about by Dale Jr. You can even use it as a couple different types of cars because of the different manufacturer flow with it in terms of your paint schemes. Hence why some of the excitement with it, thinking the big term in the long term. But coming up to the restart, 3:37 laps to go. Pataska dealing with technical issues, not going to help things. And you can see the panic for Russell. Let's follow along with Russell as he tries to sort this out. What do you think's going through his mind here, Jake, seeing all of this happening, trying to sort? Is he first? Is he second? Is he third here in the midst of these past few moments?
I think the first thing is breathe. He's now got the chance to settle into a rhythm and breathe out there on track, and he can be nice and calm with his run. He'll be looking behind him as well because Mark Redford is there and will want to be in the mix too. But to follow Sean Campbell in any race, I think is probably one of the best places to be. It's like cycling. If you're going up a mountain, the one rider you'd need to track is Tadej Pogacar or Primoz Roglic. If you're on the back of either of their wheels, you're in a good job. It's very similar here. What will be concerning them is how much that Dallas Pataska is blinking about in and out, because there is a ruling out there when it comes to the major series that if there is too much blinking out there on track, drivers will be asked to pull aside, and that will be a worrying concern for Dallas Pataska, who has led this race faultlessly from the front.
That's going to be a major thing to keep an eye on if this continues here in this one, as the top four have calmed down a bit. Wasilewski settled into 6th for reference as well. And throughout this restart, we talked about how Conway was holding on to the top 5. Well, not so much anymore, has dropped back to 10th. Meanwhile, bumping and banging to the heart of the pack, Cordell Colon, contact with Pinello in 3 and 4. Pinello trying to make the outside work in the gaming machine theme machine. Even though those games are from the 1970s, the majority of those on the car, that is still a retro-looking car trying to make it work in the battle with the 11. That is lap traffic. That's the lucky dog 1 lap down trying to pass him.
Yeah, Tom Dreiling trying to get his lap back, and obviously Cope is 2 laps back, so tough day for both of those drivers, and the Atari machine on the outside still, and yes, it might be from the 70s, but we'll give it a pass. It's a cool-looking machine.
Don't you just love the paint schemes, though, with the retro side, and especially with those who take the initiative to retrofy their own branding?
I think
Yeah,
that's...
absolutely.
I'll jump in as well. I think that's really cool to see that, because it's not just the fact that you're making a retro livery. It's the case that you're making a retro livery and you're making a retro livery of your own livery as well. And the small little adjustments that go there, not enough credit goes to the people who paint cars out there. I know so many amazing people have gone out there and painted. Isaac Edwards, I think, is a huge, great painter out there. There's the likes of Chris Bull and so many more out there over and over again. And in every team that you've got that goes out there and makes things happen, it really goes to show, somehow, some way, every team you go into, someone's a painter.
Absolutely. You see some of those different paint schemes towards the back still trying to sort themselves out. Up towards the front, though, Dallas Pataska also amongst those with the retro look, trying to hold off the battle for second. Campbell, Russell, Redford still close together. Still trying to sort things together here. Campbell also taking a very simplistic classic look. In fact, if you look at the exact number outside of the font, it is reminiscent to those green and white machines you've seen from back in the day, where in the 1980s and 90s, that was the type of design we've seen for the 26 car.
Yeah, those are all kind of like pretty cool nods that you can do to kind of past schemes, and I always appreciate that, and I think that's something to be said about kind of paint schemes as a whole as well. There's a lot of detail work that can go into them that perhaps at face value isn't really noticed, but you know, when you start digging into it, it's actually it's the detail work that really makes the best ones stand out, I think. And in terms of retro, I think Pataska probably doesn't really want the retro internet connection he's got right now. This looks like he's racing on dial-up or something, so hopefully that clears up, because he's definitely not going to want to get parked.
Don't know if it's the case there, but there are a few drivers who are towards that mark we'll keep an eye on tonight in turn. The top 4 have checked out ahead of David H. Baker. We mentioned him as part of the Legends category. Looking stellar as well when it comes to the 33, trying to keep up with these 3 you see on screen. And there is the train that he's holding off. Wachowski, Vibroski, Henderson, Banfield, Conway, all a part of this choo-choo train express here around Concord.
And at least in this stage of the race, lap 74, they are getting towards the 1/4 mark now here in this one. And the likes of these drivers know that they are just wanting to keep this calm. There's going to be a little bit of experimenting on lines, like Travis Henderson's up there. And one of the things that iRacing does really cool, Justin, is the dynamic track. And it especially shows itself in ovals. And not many places out there really understand what does that mean by dynamic track in ovals. It does mean sometimes that that line can migrate and it can move. It's going to be a little bit tough today with only 17 cars running at this point in time. But that line, especially on a 1.5 miles, just the subtle half a groove sometimes can be all it takes to being a tenth quicker or a tenth slower.
Exactly, it comes down to those inches in terms of those marks, absolutely. And just even a millisecond of too much throttle can be enough to shock the tire, Christian.
Yeah, it really can, and you do, especially at the beginning of a run, you do want to take care of the tires. It's much, much better, especially in this car, to underdrive the tire than it is to, you know, push really hard at the beginning, because the kind of the more that you underdrive it at the start of the run, the better it's going to be at the end of the run. And kind of when you get to that crossover point, which we've seen is in that 30 to 40 lap region, it can really pay off massively, you know, in the second half of the run. But then there's an art to knowing how much to push and when. And I don't think we've kind of got to that part of the race yet. But when we do, it'll become quite obvious, I think.
Trying to ask about this a little bit before. We're going to rephrase this in a different way here. What sort of pit adjustments can you make if you are struggling or need to make a change to your open setup?
Well, it really is air pressure, and obviously you can pump up the lefts if you're really, really loose. I mentioned a little bit about the dangers of going too low on the right sides, and you can deal with a little bit of balance change as well, in terms of kind of splitting front and rears, especially on the rights. If you wanted a little bit tighter of a car, you could try, you know, up in the right front air pressure. It's not generally a great thing to do because you will probably lose pace with it, but if you're really, really desperate, you can do that. And obviously the opposite is true. If you can, you know, drop a little bit of right front air pressure out, you can get a little bit more bite out of it if you are excessively tight. So there's there's kind of myriad ways that you can shuffle around. And the big thing though with these cars is because the pressure limits are so open, you do want to be careful of going too low on the rights.
Can you adjust the spoiler angle? Because that's been talked about in the past.
I believe you can, but if you're running anything other than 60 at this track, I'd be very surprised.
Why 60?
That's as much as you can put on. And, you know, you're already struggling with keeping the tires on the car. You pretty much want as much downforce and as much rear aero balance as you can get away with.
Makes sense in that regard, especially with the formation of the track. And remember, this track used to be considered a super speedway for its size, because back in the day, there were more shorter tracks on the schedule compared to the 1.5 miles you see that populate the schedule today. This was considered one of the longest tracks on the schedule back in the day at some parts.
It's kind of funny how that sort of played out, isn't it, really? We went from short tracks to mile and a halves. Well, we always had Daytona and Talladega to a degree. And then you started getting these 2-mile tracks coming in.
Just the nature of the progression of a track such as this, and of course the circuit in general, Jake, that happens from time to time and throughout the progression of the world of motorsport.
History is really funny with racetracks because a lot of racetracks that have history and have heritage often have a lot of changes that go along with it. And no track, I believe, until I would say the last 10 to 15 years has been ever in a constant state of being happy. Like, take, for example, Silverstone as a track. That is a track that last had its biggest change in 2010, but ultimately from the 80s to the 90s, it had about 6 different variation changes of the longest circuit that it had available. It's a little bit different for ovals, of course, but the one thing that I would definitely say about a place like this is that in its standing compared to everywhere else, this is the sort of place that will probably forever stay on the calendar, is probably the marquee of the mile and a halves that are out there and you try and work around and work with. But I would also say that this is the sort of circuit that is being one of the few ovals that is experimenting and changing and trying to find better formulas to make it a better place with the introduction of the Roval course and all the different variations that it has there. I think this is one of the few places where you can say, actually, I think they're being very forward-thinking with the way that they invest in Charlotte Motor Speedway for the future.
And that brings us into a dark point because a few days ago, Braden Smith, one of the most iconic and memorable figures in motorsports, had died. He was a big part of SMI, who organizes the events here at the racetrack. He founded the organization, which now operates 11 racing facilities across North America, and built this track in 1959. It became the first facility to hold races under the lights. Someone that's a visionary, where he's built condominiums here at tracks like Charlotte, Atlanta, Texas, while also having massive HDTV screens seen in the back straightaway here at the modern version of the track, as well as at Texas Motor Speedway, as well as the idea of Colossus at Bristol. As well, keep in mind, he was a big part of a lot of the innovation when it came to a lot of the racing. He was a part of that discussion for the Roval you mentioned back in 2018. There's so much that you can discuss when it comes to legacy, as well as someone who also supported charities through children's support back in the 1980s. This track became the host of the first All-Star race back in 1985, a facility that hosted for many years. Was the idea as well, in part along with Humpy Wheeler, of One Hot Night back in 1992. And of course, has built an empire of circuits across North America. Again, Braden Smith was 95. Coming up to lap 90, 87 laps down this time around. Dallas Pataska, your race leader here in the Major Series for the World 600. More coverage coming up right after this. You're watching GSRC. We'll take you side by side.
iRacing is a sim racing game that combines a true-to-life racing experience with an online community of virtual racers from all around the globe. iRacing offers a multitude of officially licensed cars and tracks, laser scanned with millimeter accuracy. Their car models and mechanical systems are based on real-world physics, engineered in cooperation with manufacturers and race teams. Their skill license system ranges from rookie to pro, ensuring members are always pitted against those with similar skill sets. Members are able to sign up for a weekly race series, compete in time trials, host a private race with friends, and participate in racing leagues created and run by the community. With over 170,000 members, iRacing works in partnership with renowned motorsports organizations like NASCAR to deliver virtual races based on the real-life NASCAR Cup Series, as well as many other series on the NASCAR ladder. iRacing also features team racing, providing a variety of options for members to create and manage their own teams. Race with friends or real-world teammates in full-length endurance events like the 24 Hours of Daytona, Spa 24, or the Bathurst 12 Hour. Additional partners include IMSA, World of Outlaws, Supercars, and IndyCar, allowing members to race in their very own Indianapolis 500, Bathurst 1000, Chili Bowl, and many more iconic events. This is iRacing, delivering the most authentic racing experience short of getting into a real race car. Sign up today at iRacing.com.
Welcome back to tonight's coverage of the World 600 here at iRacing's virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway, presented by the Majors Garage, home of free Baseline Plus setups. For more information, go to majorsgarage.com, get the discount code MajorsGSRC for 10% off. Approaching halfway through this one, approaching 300 laps to go, Pataska's led them all so far. 92 laps coming up to complete this time by.
Been a confident start, and it's been really for Dallas Pataska about building a gap early, has done so very nicely, and then after that just managing that lead, managing that margin. Great scrap going on for the last spot inside the top 10. Ross Banfield holding a slew of machines behind Melnarovic, Cologne, Freitas, Bonello, Gion in there, the 2-lap down Cope, the 1-lap down Dreiling. They're all there and scrapping, and now to the inside will go, I believe, the machine of Elvis Bonello, getting that one done nicely on Miguel Freitas for position. But we're now starting to get here that little bit of segmentation where everyone's forming into their own little pack here and there, and it becomes a case of the longer that a stint goes on, the more that segmentation comes in. And honestly, a pack like this, 6, 7, 8, if that gets to lap territory, that's going to be a very interesting case for the leaders to try and navigate around.
Take a look at the backpack meanwhile. Everybody's trying to find positions out of their backpacks. As Ross Banfield watches the wiggle motor witch up the track. Big checkup for Cologne. Bonello says, "Thank you very much. I'll take those spots."
Oh, you can't get much closer than that. I have to say, it is always a very, very tough little battle. There's been a bit of contact as well between Gion and likes of Melnarovic, who's now looking at the rear of Freitas, seeing on his outside now Cordell Cologne trying to recover back through and make up the place, and is going to run up on the high side trying to search for it. And everyone's looking for the right line here. And it becomes a case of, well, where is the right line out on track? Everyone migrating out to the top and getting themselves sorted. Huge checkup for Gion in the middle of that, because, of course, on that low line merging up was Melnarovic, and look at how much time it costs. It costs about 3 car lengths in terms of distance just being on the low line compared to the high on entry into the corner.
Yeah, Melner, it's kind of a bit of the cork in the bottle for the rear half of this pack. Freitas just runs up a little bit and nearly gets into Cordell Cologne, but it really kind of stacks up behind Banfield, and everyone was almost too nice in just accepting to ride in line for a while there, and that kind of brought everyone to the point where we nearly saw kind of a 4-car concertina in the middle of 3 and 4, and then that seemed to be the point where everybody decided enough was enough, and Banfield started to get shuffled back.
Still looking to shuffle their way around here in the midst of the pack. Big shuffle up the track. Banfield avoids the contact but pays the price spot-wise. Freitas zips by. Cologne looks to zip by in turn. Side by side, a couple rows deep as Gion looks to dive. Meanwhile, Dallas Pataska is in. Wow, that run was quick at 49 laps in.
I'm surprised by that. I am surprised how much he was trying to push then. Had the group behind closing in, hand over fist with the former Sean Campbell, Alexander Russell. They were both there. They were both chasing him in. And I think that's huge. You still got Gion and Banfield side by side trying to figure everything out. But I think that's really early. And this is going to open the door up, I think, for the likes of Campbell and Russell. The longer they go, surely the more advantageous it becomes.
Still battling hard at the back of the pack meanwhile. Still looking to battle it out, Gion and the Hodgeswood racing car hitting the rev limiter. And that's something I've noticed with a couple of the cars. The different gearing utilized. Some of them are hitting the chip. Entering one, Gian nearly trips up to the wall to complete the pass.
Yeah, a little bit surprising to have that. I mean, the gear options in this car are not quite as extensive as the modern car. We've got a contact happening, everyone going around.
There it goes. Gian is in it. Against the wall, Monerwich. Tom Drawing stopping, trying to avoid it. And we're under caution, and that pins Dallas Pataska as the first car lapped down for the Lucky Dog.
It looked to me like Gian was slowing and was slowing quite a bit. He was about 217 kilometers an hour, a mile an hour. That would have been about 150 or so, 160. Looking to try and go through. And Banfield's there at 226, just pinning it down in. I would not be surprised 54 was thinking about maybe diving down in onto the lane, because you can see he's middle of the road and he's trying to duck it down low. Has actually a wheel underneath the apron as that turns. I wonder if that's miscommunication.
He did put in the chat for in sim we're hearing that he wanted to pit. Here's the problem. Bumper to bumper to bumper, Christian. That's hard to pit in.
Yeah, I mean, I understand he wanted to pit, but when you're the line leader of 4 or 5 cars and they're all that close to you, you put in a lot of faith in that they're going to see that you've typed that.
So 3 cars stack up at the top. Pataska, Lucky Dog position. Gian already looking for the wave despite that incident. Tom Dryling was in position for that before this. And the pit stop from Dallas.
Just chose wrong. I think it's the way there, and it's cathartic that it's the stack-up car that's caused the stack-up there, but I think for Tom Dryling, you know, everyone went to the outside. He tried to follow everyone to the outside, and it was a case of that didn't quite work. And a bit of no after you there, trying to get the cars back out and going again. No, do you want to go? I'll go. No, you go. Oh, fine, we'll both go there as they went back on track. But that's just a case of choosing the wrong line, choosing the wrong moment. And a great battle off the pits as well, because Sean Campbell has just lost out to Alexander Russell in the stop.
Russell in that oval experience continuing to help him here. That is 3/10 picked up from the lane. Near dead even on the stop in of itself. That is a major difference that Russell is utilizing that oval experience.
And it's going to be his first time as the restart leader as well. And well, his last restart was better. The one prior to that was, well, it wasn't great. It looked like he didn't realize they'd gone. But at least this time, with being the control car, he won't have that problem.
So our first lead changes come in after a pit stop from Pataska. Pataska now with the biggest test of the day so far. 10th position for the restart coming up. That will be an intriguing part of all this in Mr. Sperry. Those Sperry points better be a flying if you're Pataska to get by quickly, to say the least, because he was the dominant car in the last World 600 when it was with the modern-day NASCAR Cup cars. He lost that race after attrition came in around the halfway point.
Well, we're not at the halfway point, so he can't be too concerned about attrition. But one of the things that Dallas Pataska is going to have to look at with the number 23 machine now is that it's going to feel different racing and trying to overtake than it is going out there and having just fresh air to go and attack. So this is going to be a different skill set. It's been a calm 100 laps for Dallas Pataska right now. It is not going to be a calm next 5 or 10 laps as he tries to situate, okay, how do other drivers race around like me?
Indeed. Redford up to third. Conway's been having some really good pit stop sequences, we'll say. One of the quickest stops in the field in the 21.5s. And remember, we talked about this at the start of the season. Conway started off strong with their team's preferred type of car. They've really had to adapt in turn to the differences here in the Major Series with the different cars they have to drive. And Conway's done a solid job on that adaptation point.
I'd say so. And I think that the way that he has been able to adapt, he is still inside the top 5. He has just been quietly there. Yes, he's been dropping back off of some of these runs going forward, but I think that the key is to give yourself a ticket to the end, and he's not afraid to lose positions knowing he'll gain them back later on. I think this is all about just getting a solid finish under the belt for Jamie Conway's number 42, because I don't think that this is his preferred type of car. I think he's giving it a go, and he's giving it a good go.
His team did announce earlier this week that they are rebranding as ATRS Esports, however, as a tight relationship in turn with their title sponsor Apex Tech Racing Supply, and in turn, that announcement putting them in a position for an academy program for drivers on the cusp of reaching the pro ranks. We'll talk about that later on as the green flag waves. It's Alexander Russell in the field's control for the first time.
Yeah, pretty big jump there. Campbell's going to be stuck on the outside, but we've seen him actually pull that move off through 2. He's pretty tight with Redford on the bottom, though.
Redford not giving up. Still, Campbell clearing on the outside. Henderson gives some space to let him go to 3rd position. Battle is on behind them between the 10 and the 42. Conway continuing the patience game on the long run here.
And patience is something that is absolutely needed, but for the race lead, there is no patience. Sean Campbell wants to lead this race, wants to get some laps in the belt at the front, is going to have some laps led at the front. That is what you need to do. Make a quick move and set tempo. Setting tempo wonderfully.
New race leader indeed is Campbell. Bump trap back from Russell, who tries the same line. Doesn't get the chance to get the run, so Campbell looks to set sail at the point. Pataska, by the way, still is back in the midst of the lap traffic. Thomas Cope is the first car for him to try to attack Pataska way far back in the midst of the pack.
I mean, I still think it's too early in the race to really be super aggressive with it. So I don't think he needs to really charge his way forwards from here. And likewise, I don't think that Russell and Campbell are really going to battle too much. We are only just a quarter of the way into the race.
A lot of racing to go, to say the very least. And keep in mind, the in-sim time right now is still 7:14 p.m. So we have the chance for us to go fully under the lights here by the end of the night, by around lap 350. Freitas attacking meanwhile, going underneath Conway as the leader stays single file.
Conway definitely looking at this race in 7th position, losing 2 off of the start. Freitas and Vorosky going through. And it has been a quiet run up, actually, for Miguel Freitas. Freitas, I think, has been the quiet driver who's just subtly got 1 position here, 1 position there. Very much the same drive as Mark Redford has had. Redford currently in 3rd, has Travis Henderson just behind him trying to play the same role. And also keep in mind in this race right now, who's just clawed his way back into the top 5, Mr. I will make all of the moves and get to the front as quickly as possible. Ryan Wasilewski's found himself back after the early pit stop on lap 40.
Wasilewski indeed continuing that charge back. Conway continuing the charge back the other direction, the wrong way. In fact, currently, did you see that fight with Bobrovsky trying to get the outside to work with Freitas? Good improvement for Freitas, keep in mind, who struggled very early in this one.
Yeah, it's definitely starting to look better as the race goes on here. We'll have to see if that continues to improve. The track temperature hasn't really dropped that much. It's only down to 85 Fahrenheit now. And it started around about 90, so track temperature is actually more constant than I was expecting it was going to be. Oh, I hear a car going around. It's the 64, Thomas Cope.
Caution is out. That is at the back of the pack. And we're under caution once again, the 64 of Cope. And it was with the slide with the help of Julian Gion, who was the lucky dog car prior to that incident.
Well, that was fortunate, wasn't it? You have a lucky dog, or you cause the slide that gets you the lucky dog. It's not ideal.
No, it doesn't.
It certainly does it. It was just a checkup, really. It was just sticking the nose up the inside, trying to get it sorted in towards turn number 1. And effectively, Cope, who's a little bit further back than that, found himself in an issue with that sliding. And it's only a case of you got to break 90 degrees of angle to the racetrack, and they are going to throw the caution. So the first one, okay, he gathers it back up, but it's that causes the caution, that big slide in front of the pack. And they absolutely do not want here, the iRacing automated system, to have a huge wreck on their hands. It's just as simple as just leaving the nose there on the inside, trying to chop down when you're not clear. And I'm surprised at that with the 64 getting caught up in that, especially being one of the 2 drivers today here, Justin, with a spotter.
Yeah, absolutely. And we mentioned, because the contact, Gian no longer is positioned for the lucky dog. That's Tom Dreiling, who will now be in that position 1 lap down because of that spin. Wasilewski is electing to pit and is the only driver in the field to do so here. An interesting play. Check that. David H. Baker also is rolling into the pit boxes currently.
Yeah, a bit surprised by this. Obviously, a very, very short run we had there, so not really sure why he's decided to come down, but we'll see if there's any offset from doing this.
We'll indeed see. We talked about, by the way, the change for Apex Tech and its structure. The way it works is the top team is ATRS. We talked about the acquisitions, Jake, before. That's where they get signaled out. Then you have the Academy team, which is for those training preparing to be with the pro team. The ATRS racing drivers make a majority of the team, for reference, in that regard. Then you have the community team, which is the foundation in those looking to have fun in the various leagues and races. A lot of growth from there. All well, Chris Barrett and Tom Mayle will now be managing the day-to-day operations as of June the 22nd.
Makes sense. But the one thing that I have my concerns about in terms of a team like this is the fact that they are looking to branch their teams out into 2 or 3 different divisions. And often I found that when you get a sim racing team, you start dividing a team out and saying, okay, well, you're this element and you're that element, and you sort of grow out and you get more members, you get more people. You effectively reach the sense of a critical mass out there in terms of a team where essentially you have 2 different teams inside of a team. You don't really get that feeling of everyone's a team, everyone's together on the same page. You feel like you're different elements or 2 or 3 different teams. And I think that the best sim racing example I saw of this was with back in the day, the Evolution Racing team, which at that time was Evolution Racing Australia, because they had about 10 different drivers all jump ship, break off and make their own team. And that team just so happened to be Altus Esports, which has gone out and become one of the premier, if not the premier, Australian sim racing team when it comes to pro content on iRacing.
In the matter of team discussion here, we mentioned Grizzly TFR and their movements. We've mentioned Jamie Conway and the movements for his respective side. Satellite Racing has done a very stellar job when they've made starts here in the past. Your opinions, Christian, on the dynamics and the way they've shifted over the years, especially in the league scene, such as the Major Series. From your perspective, you've ran in different organizations in different capacities, have different allegiances now. What's been that progression like as time's gone on for a series such as the Major Series, such as this one?
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting, especially in majors. There's been obviously teams that kind of have been around for forever. Obviously in Euro, you used to see in well, it was obviously split TFR and Grizzly. Now it is TFR Grizzly. That's a mainstay of Euro. Then International has pretty much been a mainstay of the Kinetic team, and America's, I mean, when it started running majors, it was the Alliance team was kind of like the main team. Then recently you've kind of seen Kinetic there, then it was Forge. It moves around a fair bit. There's obviously Evolve as well. And I think it's mostly people trying to find who they just enjoy racing with more than anything else. And I think that the longer the league has gone on, the more we've kind of seen people group up more so with their friends than anything else.
Green flag is out, 285 laps to go for Campbell. Russell in second. Third spot, Redford, Henderson, Bobrovsky, and Conway. Amongst the top 7, Bobrovsky, Freitas watching alone. Poor launch for Conway. 3 wide for Conway. Pataska passes them all.
Wow, so Pataska wasting little time off at the start. Conway absolutely nowhere again, getting it up to speed, and that's going to be very surprising to deal with moving forward into this one. You've got to be alert off of these starts, and if you're going to be dropping back places time and time again, that's going to be really costing you late on, because late on, when you're getting right down to it, the margins get thinner and thinner. That's when you start realizing, okay, caution upon caution is going to come along, and you're going to have to need as much help as possible from your restarts. You have no restart when you go out there and race in this series. You're going to be losing a lot of points.
Wachaleski trying to charge behind the 69 machine. Wachaleski, remember, the first to a pit, tries the outside, makes it work, coming out of turn 4. In front of him, Pataska also passing by Miguel Freitas. Right now, Pataska 1 second back of the leader. Wachaleski 2 seconds back for reference. Also dropping back still, Conway, who just seems to be in the struggle bus when it comes to the restart gear in it. Christian.
I don't think he's necessarily struggling. He's just not being aggressive at all. And I think at this point in the race, that's totally fine, you know. I'm actually more surprised that we're seeing a decent bit of aggression from other drivers. Obviously, Pataska is wasting no time driving forwards. We've seen it pretty much all race from Wachaleski. There's been others that have been quite calm. Sean Campbell has been pretty calm, I would say, as has Alexander Russell. And I think even though Jamie Conway isn't up at the front with those guys, he's kind of approaching the race the same way. And I think he's got more to offer, and we'll see that towards the end.
Pataska, meanwhile, looking to be at the pointy end of the field still, is already up to 4th, running as quick as 2 to 4 tenths quicker than everybody else around him while passing cars. Redford gives the space for 3rd. Pataska's up to 3rd. He's jumped up 7 spots since the restart.
And this comes down to philosophy. Do you want to be aggressive with the tyres or do you not? And if you want to be aggressive out there with the tyres and you want to get to the front of the field, you can do that in a race like this. You can absolutely fly forward in a race like this. The issue you're going to have is you are going to pay for it later on. It's very much like taking out a bank loan. Yes, you'll have a lot of money, but you will have to pay the tax man.
With interest.
Yeah.
And the question is, how does the interest play into this one? For a racetrack, battle for 2nd. Pataska alongside Russell. Jumps on up. Russell nearly diamonds into him. Redford tries to dive underneath Russell as Russell goes all the way to the wall to try and rim ride it.
I'm not sure he went there by intent, if I'm honest. It looked like he was having quite a moment. He got very, very close to the wall, and it didn't look like there was a lot that he could have done about it there, but he has got back in line now.
Could have been very, very dangerous with that line. Campbell. See how that's played out, meanwhile, for the race leader. We've seen great speed from Campbell. Pataska looking to try and peel back the race lead, though, all over the back bumper of the car in front. Kane Racing inspired design, trying to play defense for now.
Have to remember as well, these drivers at the front are 1 and 2 in the championship, so this for Dallas Pataska will have a lot more significance than just passing Sean Campbell on circuit for the race lead. It is passing Sean Campbell to start dealing damage in the championship outlay. And remember, it's 163 points. And consider this as well, 7 races in this season so far, Justin. Dallas Pataska, through the various categories that have been around, has 6 of them.
And that type of a year when it comes to the championship fight. But now Pataska wants to fight up at the top side for the race lead. He wants his points back up at the front. Pataska's won 2 of the rounds out of 7 starts this season. He tries to build up the run, nearly hits the wall. Here comes Pataska with the crossover. Will this be given up from the 26? No! Campbell pushes harder.
You can see how much it means trying to fight off of the exit, and it is still there, but crucially enough, around this circuit, Christian, you got a good understanding of it. The bottom line rules.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and I was actually really surprised that Campbell was able to hold the top as well as he was. He has been pretty aggressive, though, in how he's trying to hold Pataska down to the bottom. And I think now it's actually going to get more difficult for Pataska. He's actually backing out of it. He's going to sit in behind.
You know partly why, too? Guess who's in fourth and going for third? Wasilewski, his teammate, is right there on the fresher tires as well. So the charge is on. Campbell feeling lots of pressure. Russell there as well as Redford. All the top 5 cars covered by about half a second. Up the track goes Wasilewski.
And again, searching for the right angle as they will run nose to tail on the run up then towards turns 3 and 4. Once again, their 126th revolution of this circuit. A little shot to the back from Dallas Pataska. So now you're getting that little bit of racing. This is what we like. Rubbing's racing after all and just showing that I don't want to be stuck here behind. Now down to the inside goes Wasilewski, and he is going to move up and get himself into third. Hardly moved off of that inside line, so brilliant grip going on for car 86 right now, and that 86 Chevrolet looking great.
Here comes Pataska for the charge back. Look from Russell as the bottom opens up for Satellite Racing. Campbell not backing down in the RSR by butt kicker car. Up the track goes the 26. Pataska to the race lead once more. Wasilewski going for second.
Yeah, Pataska with much better drive through 3 and 4 that time. Wasilewski's running up the track. He actually got into the left rear of Campbell there. No harm done, but that could have been much, much worse. He's going to have a much easier time of it through 3 and 4, though. I think he's nose to nose with Campbell at entry.
Still not giving up Campbell whatsoever. That's the hardest we've seen him race all night so far. Below the first seam, in fact. Trying to squeeze. Not backing down with the 86 pressurizing him. Still a long way to go in the run, remember. This is still just 16 laps in or so since the restart.
God, how much does Wasilewski want to lean on the car outside? It is a case of just running to the finitest of finite limits, and it is going to be a cause of concern the longer that this goes. And this time he's going to give it into the side. He's going to push him up a little bit, about a half a track is the push, but again, they remain too wide, and Campbell, who has been really good on his tires, 2 drivers in front, haven't been so much. They've been a little bit more aggressive when it has come to those decisions and those calls, and again into the side, not once but twice. So this is a case really where effectively you'd have to say Sean Campbell is not willing to budge at all. They're bumping on the straight now. This is incredible stuff between these two.
Both cars looking okay. The give and take, though, is gone. Wasilewski feeding the right rear up to the 26. Campbell says, num num, I'll hold it up here, thank you. Oh, and at this point, Russell wants Wasilewski to just clear at this point, trying to push him.
Yeah, he's trying to give him a bit of help through the quad oval there, but Campbell just hanging on to that right rear. That's going to go badly.
Clear. Up in the wall goes the 86. Campbell holds on to the bottom. Russell dives between both of them. Back side by side for second. Wasilewski forced up to the top side. Still trying to keep it up as Russell. Campbell looking okay with a bit of scrapes. Meanwhile, building up the run behind Russell again.
Yeah, I think Wasilewski is going to be a bit upset about that. I mean, he wasn't clear, but at the same time, Campbell could have cut him a break.
I think everyone was going to predict that was happening. I mean, even the Magic 8 Ball had a good idea of that. It did say try again later, but that was still a case of everybody knew that was going to happen. The fortunate thing is that it happened right up against the wall and not in the middle of the circuit where it would have really exacerbated the incident.
I think somebody threw that Magic 8 Ball out about 15 laps ago. Maybe that's part of it. Wasilewski still trying to find some magic up on the top. Campbell now in the midst of a battle with the 86. Full throttle moment for Wasilewski, trying to keep this up on Campbell. Wasilewski giving the business back to Campbell.
Wow, 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 wow. Towards 3 and 4 once again. Now it's roles reversed, and this becomes an interesting point. Does the 26 of Campbell here want to give back exactly what was dished out to him on that outside line? They can play that game once again. It will be no love lost between these two, and I wonder how the Christmas card list is going to look after the race here tonight at Charlotte.
I don't think there is going to be one, if I'm honest.
Oh, Wasilewski washing down the track now, trying to push Campbell down.
I am surprised it was so aggressive so early, though. I mean, we're not even halfway.
Hey, spots are spots, right? And if you're not racing for a spot, are you a racer?
But it doesn't pay anything right now, though. I mean, that could have ended up. I mean, I still think it's pretty bad. I mean, Wasilewski hit the wall pretty hard. Campbell, I don't think got out of it unscathed, but it could have been much, much worse. Both cars could have ended up in the fence. You know, lost laps if they couldn't drive them back, and at best lose the faster pair, which, you know, in such a long race, you don't want to give that up so early on.
Still holding on for now is Russell in second spot. Wasilewski now single file with all of this, and things starting to calm down for the moment. For the moment is the key word. By the way, Pataska's lead by 1.6 seconds, his largest lead of the race after all that. Anyone surprised? The silence says it all.
It's just given him the gap to go and run his own race. He's done all the work to get himself there. A bit of too wide now as Vavrovsky and Bonello start fighting out for position. This is the race for 7th and 8th, and ultimately Vavrovsky is going to hold up on the high side. Miguel Freitas is there as well. And it's often down to who can have that element of fight in them, who can make the right moves at the right time. Wasilewski's battle was good for one driver and one driver only through all of that. That was car number 23. And they are nose to tail once again, not going to be in a position to fight too wide and really fight for it. But think about the two cars who are on the back, who are really staying patient here in terms of this race. One Chevrolet, one Ford, Redford in the Ford, Henderson in the Chevrolet. Both those TFR Grizzly cars are pretty much going to be in a position where they are happy to sit, happy to watch each other hit hell's bells out of each other and say, well, we're going to have a clean car and we're going to have great tires and we're going to go and take these places later on in the race.
Yeah, exactly, and that's how I would play it too, and that's why I don't understand really the aggression that's going on, because I think when you look at the guys who are taking it easy, that they're not losing anything out. They're not even double-digit seconds off the lead at this point, and we've had a caution pretty much before the end of every long run so far. So there's no advantage to trying to pull a lead. So I just yeah, and I mean it's happening again. Wasilewski and Campbell side by side, less than a sheet of paper between them.
Sport coming in for the point you made there too, Christian, with the battling here too, with there still being a long way to go. It's still not impacting them in the cars though, because how you think in the car could be different to what you think now, as Campbell nearly turns himself over. Wasilewski to clear.
Well, that sorts that battle out, because Wasilewski drops back a position, and then Redford will take one away for it. But again, it just goes to show you how much confidence you need to have in the driver you're around there with. Wasilewski on that outside was just trying to shepherd and take as much track as possible. When you've got two drivers fighting, effectively, one driver dictates where you go, the other tries to find the gap and tries to work with that gap. And you got two drivers there, Justin, who absolutely do not want to give anything up to the other driver.
Especially that give and take getting really burned on here in this one. Already coming up towards 259 laps to go in this one, by the way. This is all sorted out. Russell in second, Campbell third, Redford, Wasilewski, Henderson, Bobrovsky, Freitas, Bonello quietly improving in ninth, and Banfield still holding on to the top 10. Now some of the tire wear showing. Henderson going for the dive on the 86, and so much for that difference in terms of strategy for the 86. Remember, he pit during the last caution. That's about a 10-lap difference. He had a 10-11 second stop during that window, and now that's kind of mitigated and if not equalized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering how much the contact with the wall is hurting him as well. He doesn't look like he's down on straightaway speed, but you know, it's a pretty big hit with the right front. I don't think his car is going to be perfect after that.
Absolutely. There is damage on Wasilewski's right side from all of that. Campbell got away fairly scot-free. Still trying to reel back in Russell. 33 flats being turned by your race leaders outside.
Oh, turn. On the front stretch, it's Dreiling who's gone around in the infield, and we've got a caution.
Tom driving around once more. Caution flag is out on the speedway again. And Tom not having fun here. Spins it around into the grass. This is not the artificial turf of the modern day track, but this time he did get help.
Yeah, I think that's really crucial here because it is the 42 of Jamie Conway who have been going backwards. He apologizes over the radio. He just gets into the right rear on the exit. That is as fate gets, and then suddenly around you go. And you have to be careful with a slide like that, side on, Justin, when you go through. Of course, these are 87-style machines. They don't have those flaps up on the car, which effectively keep the car pointed down. It is very possible at higher speed circuits that you can actually roll the car and get air under the car with that really huge rollover effect.
Yeah, the barrel roll's always very eminent when it comes to this track and when it comes to these cars. No barrel roll this time as we're under caution. Expecting pit stops once more. Pataska, longest stint out of everyone after, remember, having to take the wave around after pitting under green. His last stop. So here comes the race leader pit stop window. Wasilewski loses spots with his strategy to come in.
And a set of tires as well, effectively.
Absolutely. So we'll see where things cycle around. Joey Gian is the lucky dog. Thomas Cope is the only car one lap down in the field in turn.
So Thomas Cope being one lap down only now means that no matter what happens, if there's a caution, he will be the next lucky dog. But again, it's a battle off of the lane, which I think is going to be interesting now, and how they decide that they get what they want and how aggressive they get. Now, the first driver actually to get off and away and out is not Pataska, but it is Alexander Russell, who did well. Redford as well also had a good stop there in third. Sean Campbell has been shuffled back into fourth position then through that stop.
And again, experience paying off in the pit lane for Alexander Russell. Another few tenths picked up on that entryway is enough to help him cycle ahead in turn for the positions. And also knowing the exact incrementations for the speed limit of 50 miles per hour, also critical. So now it gets intriguing here. How do you play this out with the patience game when the lights are starting to potentially turn on here in the next little bit, Christian, because the tempers are already hot. It's already acting like it's one hot night, but in the daytime conditions. The clouds are settling over the racetrack and the track temperature is starting to dip a bit. How would you play this out to be able to strategize yourself from this point to get to the end of the race?
I still think it's too early to really be going for it. You know, we're still not at halfway yet. I think what I'd be mainly focusing on is trying to dial in exactly where I want to be for air pressure and getting myself in a good spot where I've got, you know, pretty good not runaway tire wear behavior over the course of a run. And that's really what I'd be focused on now, just doing really minor changes to kind of dial that in, because you do it all pre-race, but the track's never quite the same. The way you drive is never quite the same. So yeah, that's really what I'd be doing. I'd still just not be racing anybody. I'd just be focused entirely on trying to dial in the car as best as I could with air pressure and hope that that set me up for the end of the race.
So as we're under caution here and have a bit of a moment here, you do lots of work when it comes to iRacing the vehicle side. How do you optimize your tire pressures at a track such as Charlotte with the 1987 cars?
Well, you can go lower and it's for sure going to give you more speed, but the ranges that we allow on this car are very, very open. You know, the modern cars pretty much restrict you to minimums of, say, 45s on the rights, which is, you know, pretty much the optimal place to be for most tracks. You'd actually maybe want to try and push those a bit lower if we let you, but with the 87s you can really run them very, very low. So we've kind of been chasing that a little bit and just trying to see how low we can push them, because it is speed to be lower, but you just got to be careful that you don't get so low that basically there's not enough support in the tire to deal with the entry and exit conditions. But then when you're around that point, the balance changes with air pressure are really, really huge.
Sorry, I just...
Jake, have you got something?
I have. Wasilewski just came in a second time during that caution period.
Gotta be damage.
23.5 seconds. That's about a full stop. Yeah, might have taken the faster pair, in fact. No, he didn't. And he's coming up cold trickle style to the field. Green flag is out. Russell leads them to the green and has a good launch. Wasilewski, meanwhile, had to check up for the whole entire pack.
And we've seen that before in motor racing, where you get onto the back of the pack and you have to check up and you're not quite alert to it. So he's done well to get himself sorted. It was a good launch, actually, by Alexander Russell. But again, there's just something about the way that Dallas Pataska drives the car, that he can get that pointed in lower than anybody else, keep the grip better than anybody else, get the run better than anybody else at the moment. That Chevrolet is planted at the moment, but Alexander Russell has got his car all over everything right now, and it's allowing Redford and Campbell keep themselves in the mix.
Much lower line for Pataska, trying to get underneath the fender of Russell, and does. Give it to Dallas Pataska, back to the race lead to the inside. Does Russell fight it? No. Russell backs it down. Campbell up to third. Redford back to fourth position. The top four now checking out after the restart.
Redford is kind of continually getting better, I think. He's moved from, you know, just sort of running inside the top 10 to now being able to really hold on with a top 3, top 4 if you consider Wasilewski when he wasn't damaged.
Give and take, coming in. Russell gives up the spot. Keep in mind, Russell did have some damage on one of the fenders prior to the caution flag. It's worth noting. Think about Freitas. Meanwhile, is still in 7th. Here's the look back at the top 4, who are already losing ground to Pataska by half a second. Russell starting to crack the throttle.
Yeah, and everyone's really trying to find that groove and that rhythm, and it looks like early settling for Dallas Pataska. That run through the pack, through the cars, and effectively this new lease of life at the front of the field is going to be, okay, what do I do well better than anybody else in this field? I can build a seconds gap. And when you build a seconds gap, you're not looking behind. You're just focusing on your lines and getting into the rhythm. And a lot of drivers talk about building a gap. It's not often that you get to do that in NASCAR circles here, Justin, but if Dallas Pataska's strategy is build a gap of a second and then work it out from there, I like what he's doing right now, because he is able to just go out there and drive a fresh car better than anybody else. He's got more confidence than anybody else at the start of a green flag run.
Absolutely at this point. Give credit to Russell, does a lot of work in the community when it comes to sim racing. He's a part-time racer on the schedule for the Major Series this season. Always intriguing to see him around and look to try and see how he can do from the Midwest iRacing region.
I feel like for the most part, Russell is kind of running the race similarly to how I would. He doesn't, I mean, he's had some moments where he's kind of pushed a little bit, but the majority of it looks like he's just kind of on cruise control, trying to not get involved in fights, just run his own race and let it kind of come to him.
And that's the critical thing. Yep.
Sorry, every time I am looking at Miguel Freitas, he is close to, if not scraping, the outside of 2. And I think he is absolutely pushing the limit off of that 999 machine, and something just isn't quite there that's clicking. He's just got to stay a little bit calmer, I think, because he could very easily lose that 7th position if he's not too careful with the way he's driving.
Freitas last time by 32.609, 2/10 off the lead pace, but is running a bit of a different line compared to majority of the pack, with Banfield catching in the corners with the lower groove as the sun's starting to set here at Charlotte. 244 laps to go. Also, Elvis Bonello is in this fight. Keep in mind for the long term here. This is the patient part of the race we talked about. And Christian, it's been fun so far to see a lot of the battling, a lot of it coming in and coming up to be very heated as we've seen. But right now, this is towards the calm before the calm, before the calm, before the calm, before the storm.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that makes sense. There's just really nothing to be gained by pushing at this stage of the race. And we're kind of we're at the point now where there's a pretty decent amount of rubber down on the track, and it's cooled down. It's cooled down a little bit. It's not cooled down a tremendous amount, but it would be nice to see a full green flag pit cycle again, like we almost had at the very beginning of the race, just to see if anyone's tire situation has improved or if anyone's still in trouble in that sense. I would expect that everyone is going to have improved. It's just a question as to have some of the guys who were struggling to get even 40 laps out of the tires, have they improved enough to now be able to do a full fuel run?
Wisconsin-based drivers still looking to hold on to third amidst all of this. And you're right in terms of the fuel mark. Remember, 70 to 72 was the estimated total with fuel tank based on the fuel burn. Here's the tough part. No one's been able to really hold on to the tires past lap 40, if not lap 45 so far, Jake.
Yeah, but the job gets easier when the track cools down. Of course, that track started off at a nice 90 Fahrenheit. I believe that's down by a good sizable number now. In, I would say, British terms, it's 29C. So I would say that they have had that drop, and it is only going to get easier from this point onwards. So just keep an eye on that drivers will be able to try and extend out how long they're able to go on their tires. And I think that the drivers who were struggling, especially in that early stint, were struggling because it was green flag. Tom Dreiling, for example, couldn't get that car going past 30 laps on that opening stint. He's looked absolutely fine since adapting and adjusting.
That adaptation, so critical to be able to change and be able to learn about the surroundings and change the track conditions. You can't adapt, you're dropping back. There's the saying, right? If you're not moving forwards, you're moving backwards.
Well, sometimes if you ain't looking forward, you're looking back. And I believe it's very, very difficult, Christian, if you're a driver, to be very quick whilst constantly looking in your rearview mirror. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's where I think at this stage of the race, you just don't really race. If somebody wants to go, then you know, let them do it. Like, it's not going to win them anything. So there's no point messing yourself up trying to get involved in a battle with somebody at a point in the race where there's no points given. It would genuinely be different. I mean, I'm not a fan of stage racing, but it would be different if there was there was points awarded at halfway or something like that.
So how do you stay hydrated or stay nutrition filled?
Nutrition, I'm probably not the person to ask, if I'm completely honest. But,
do you usually have French fries sitting on the side, or I'm not sure what you mean by that?
Well, it's pretty much whatever's available that I think I'm going to be able to eat in a pit stop. So that can range from. Huh?
Wait, you have food set aside for pit stops? I don't.
Oh, for this race, yeah, it's 400 laps. Like, you're in the car for 4 hours. What's it gonna have snacks?
I'm dropping back here, but yeah, that's a good point.
You telling me you don't have snacks for long races?
No.
How do you survive? Are you like even really awake by the end of these races?
No. In the car, if you mean that.
Right, yeah. Like, I mean, that's why I do it. I do it so that I'm, like, not, you know, feeling terrible by the end of the race.
I'd just like to point out I have no horse in this argument, because while you lot are racing 400 laps, I'm going to struggle to get this thing around 4.
I mean, and I'll be quite honest, the 1987 cars I can drive at Darlington, but at Talladega, I ran one official race in the past with this car. If you look back at the records, I barrel rolled by myself on lap 1 at full speed in turn 3. That is how difficult this is to ride for a corner, let alone a lap.
It is, simply put, a marvel of racing that we've got right now, and a really interesting pack actually forming. The gaps have stayed pretty stagnant at the front. 8 tenths between Dallas Pataska and Sean Campbell. Alexander Russell 6 tenths of a second back, but crucially just keeping that gap at the same pace and dragging along a 3-car train of TFR Grizzlies, which are just there, just effectively like a family, essentially, just looking for food, looking for scraps, looking for positions. And this is what they do. They sit in the pack, they wait for their opportunities, and as and when they come to them, they go for it. I mean, David H. Baker, for example, second at Indianapolis as part of the, I'd say, the month of May crown that goes on. Yes, I know we're at the back end of June here racing this World 600, but essentially, TFR Grizzly look at this race and go, we like where we are. We're sitting, we're trying to work with what we have. And I remember once upon a time at a race which was pretty much similar with Daytona, it was a TFR train of about 4, and only one driver had any way of getting to Tim Clyson's and the way of trying to work around, as we do get a bit of battling behind, as now Ross Banfield goes to the inside of Miguel Freitas.
Still side by side as Banfield watches near contact again for Freitas to the wall. That's exactly what we talked about earlier. If Freitas didn't change things up, he wouldn't be running 7th much longer. Now, he's looking to just try and hold on now in what could be 9th by the end of the next set of corners. But now a big bobble, though, trying to get him under braking. Freitas trying to send it and haul up on the 3rd line to make things stick nearly to the wall again.
God, you have to be patient on that high line. You really, really do, because you are waiting for an eternity. Yes, you've got the banking that helps you up at the top, but you're waiting for the point where you can put the throttle down fully and attack. The thing with these 1.5 milers is that you do have to be very patient with the way that you put the car into the corner and wait essentially for the right time for grip to be around to play with so you can go out and attack. It's so easy to get very tight in these machines, and for those who just get started with ovals, think it's just being flat. It absolutely isn't. And it's very difficult when you are trying to get in later on the stint when you've got a loose machine and you know that you have to be even more narrow with the way that you turn in and work with the car's tyre as it goes through. That rear right we saw, especially in the opening stint, took a battering as it went around.
Into the grass goes Freitas as well, keep in mind. The next pack is another 2 seconds behind. Wasilewski battling with Monerwich, for example. And we mentioned the long pit stop for the 86. Well, Wasilewski's car not quick in the same regard as before. In fact, he's gained a few more train cars in there. Gian, Thomas Cope, the lucky dog position driver. Tom Drawin also is closing on this.
Yeah, he's definitely hurting. I think at some point he's going to be forced to take his fast repair. I mean, the car doesn't look too bad, but the pace is just totally evaporated. You know, earlier on he was looking like a race-winning contender, but now is just not there. I mean, he's lost the lead group. He's building up a train behind him. It's just not looking good. But as long as he doesn't go off the lead lap, he can probably survive like this until we get to about lap 300-ish, and then I suspect we'd see him take the fast repair.
Yeah, and that's the major thing. You take the fast repair too early, you don't have a fast repair the rest of the way, obviously. You get involved in a major wreck, your race is done instead. Hence why we're seeing drivers like Cordell Colon still running and a couple of the others who had mandatory repairs to do. If you get a major wreck, you do have that in your back pocket just in case.
It's the T car. I always go back to 97 Belgian Grand Prix in the pouring rain, where effectively it was a case of 13 cars are out. But because 13 cars are out and the session had to be red flagged, essentially the number one drivers all got to jump into the T car, the spare car that they had. They don't have it anymore, but were able to go back out then and run the race and essentially stop what would have been a 5-car restart and effectively made it a 16-car restart, I believe it was at the time. And we still got a really, really good wet race out of that one, won by a couple of Jordans. So that gives you a bit of perspective here on what I think is a really cool feature, and actually one of the staples of what makes iRacing an esport more than a replication of what is real-world racing, because you do get yourself essentially, I know the World Series of Poker is going on right now, you get an extra bullet to play with, essentially.
Looking on board still, watching this battle, Tom Dreiling. It's had a couple spins, one with help, 3 with trouble rather, with the tire wear earlier on. And remember, the next time the drivers at the racetrack is with the Formula One machines, with Mercedes AMG E-Performance cars. Red Bull Ring Grand Prix for the Austrian Grand Prix on July the 17th. So a major difference in terms of what you're feeling in the car compared to the raw feel of the 1987 stock cars.
Yeah, watch track limits there. That's going to be huge in terms of how they navigate and manage that race. But I'm sure Christian's got a better understanding of it than I have. I've been covering a lot of that series overall over the last couple of years. But that Mercedes moving on forward is just an absolute behemoth, because it's not too difficult the same way that the MP430 was originally, but at the same time, it is so tactical with the likes of the ERS deployment.
Yeah, it is, and I would say that it's a car that's not really inherently difficult to just drive, but to manage tires and, you know, have good pace with it is actually really, really difficult.
Oh, indeed.
So, racing then still going on. I believe that we do have a couple of technical issues here, ladies and gentlemen, so we will stand by with things as we're going. Charlotte Motor Speedway race still going on here for the World 600 at this point in time. Let's step aside for one moment. We'll be back with more after this.
Welcome back to Charlotte Motor Speedway. Thomas Cope bringing out the caution after spinning out on a 71-lap run